without seeing. Everyone has memorized now. I think we are discussing for so many days. Boliye. Who would like to recite? Flawlessly. Yes, Pranab Prabhu. Recite.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadiyasya Yataha Anvayatitarasya Artheshu Sa Avigna Swarata Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yat Suryo Tejovari Midam Yatha Binimayo Yartha Tisargo Amrisha
Dhamna Swain.
Dhamna Sene Sada Nirasta
Guhakam.
Kuhakam Nirasta Kuhakam Sattam Param Dhimahi.
Okay. Okay, we will continue from Śrīla Prabhupāda's purport. So yesterday, Prabhupada was giving the analogy. What was the analogy that Śrīla Prabhupada gave? That is the similarity between the Supreme Lord and the living entities. Who remembers? Prabhupada gave the analogy of the gold mine and the objects made from gold. So qualitatively they are the same, but quantitatively there is difference. From the next paragraph, conditioned souls beginning from Brahmā, who engineers the entire universe down to the insignificant ant, are all creating, but none of them are independent of the Supreme Lord. The materialist wrongly thinks that there is no creator other than his own self. This is called māyā or illusion. Because of his poor fund of knowledge, the materialist cannot see beyond the purview of his imperfect senses. And thus he thinks that matter automatically takes its own shape without the aid of a superior intelligence. This is refuted in the śloka by Śrīla Vyāsadeva. Since the complete whole or the absolute truth is the source of everything, nothing can be independent of the body of the absolute truth. Whatever happens to the body quickly becomes known to the embodied. This is a principle. Whatever happens to the body quickly becomes known to the embodied. Similarly, the creation of the body of the absolute whole. Similarly, the creation is the body of the absolute whole. Therefore, the absolute whole knows everything directly and indirectly that happens in the creation. The Supreme Lord is known as Vishwa Atma. Kunti Devi in her prayers, she says, that the Supreme Lord is Vishwa Atma. We are Jivatma, we are Anu, and the Supreme Lord is Vibhu. So he is cognizant of everyone and everything. Why? Because his expansion is in the form of Paramatma, who is situated in the heart of everyone and everything. So he is fully cognizant. He knows everything directly and indirectly that happens in the creation. In the Smriti Shastra, it is also stated that the absolute whole or Brahman is the ultimate source of everything. Everything emanates from him and everything is maintained by him. And at the end, everything enters into him. That is the law of nature. Creation, maintenance, and destruction. In the Smriti mantra, the same is confirmed. It is said that the source from which everything emanates at the beginning of Brahma's millennium and the reservoir to which everything ultimately enters is the absolute truth or Brahman. Material scientists take it for granted that the ultimate source of the planetary system is the sun. But they are unable to explain the source of the sun. Herein the ultimate source is explained. According to the Vedic literature, Brahma is the creator of the universe. Yet he had to meditate to get inspiration for such creation. Therefore, neither Brahma nor the sun is the ultimate creator. It is stated in the shloka that Brahma was taught Vedic knowledge by the personality of Godhead. One may argue that Brahma, being the original living being, could not be inspired because there was no other being living at that time. Herein it is stated that the Supreme Lord inspired the secondary created Brahma in order that Brahma could carry out his creative functions. So one may argue that Brahma is the first created being. So how could he have been inspired by someone? But here Śrīla Vyāsadeva is very emphatically mentioning that it is the Supreme Lord, that one who is responsible for everyone. The intelligence for creation, the ability, intelligence, and empowerment to Brahma is given by Krishna. Herein it is stated that the Supreme Lord inspired the secondary creator Brahma in order that Brahma could carry out his creative functions. So the supreme intelligence behind all creations is the absolute Godhead, Sri Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Sri Krishna states that he is only who superintends the creative energy Prakriti, which constitutes the totality of matter. So many times we discussed this verse of Bhagavad Gita, māyā dakshena prakriti suyate se charachara. Therefore, Śrīla Vyāsadeva does not worship Brahma, but the Supreme Lord who guides Brahma in his creative activities. In this shloka, the particular word abhigna and swarata are significant. These two words distinguish the Supreme Lord from all other living entities. No other living entity is either abhigna or swarata. Abhigna means one who is fully cognizant, and swarata means one who is fully independent. That is, no one is either fully cognizant or fully independent. Even Brahma has to meditate upon the Supreme Lord in order to create. That we will see in the next canto. That Brahmaji, when he performs austerity and he gets the order to create, so what he does, he meditates on the Supreme Lord. So here it is said that Brahma has to meditate upon the Supreme Lord in order to create. Then what to speak of the great scientists like Einstein? The brains of such a scientist are certainly not the products of any human beings. Scientists cannot manufacture such a brain. And what to speak of foolish atheists who defy the authority of the Lord? Even Mayavadi impersonalists who flatter themselves that they can become one with the Lord are neither abhigna nor swarata. Prabhupada in particular is hammering both the atheist in the form of scientist and the impersonalist, those who try to deny and defy the authority and existence of the Supreme Lord. Such impersonalists undergo severe austerities to acquire knowledge to become one with the Lord. But ultimately they become dependent on some rich disciple who supplies them with money to build monasteries and temples. Atheists like Ravan or Hiranyakashipu had to undergo severe penances before they could flout the authority of the Lord. But ultimately they were rendered helpless and could not save themselves when the Lord appeared before them as cruel death. This is also the case with the modern atheist. They also dare to flout the authority of the Lord. Such atheists will be dealt with similarly. For history repeats itself. Whenever man neglects the authority of the Lord, nature and her laws are there to penalize them. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita in the well-known verse, Yada yada hi dharmasya glani. Whenever there is decline of dharma and the rise of adharma, O Arjuna, then I incarnate myself. Bhagavad Gita 4.7. That the Supreme Lord is all perfect is confirmed in all the Shruti mantras. It is said in the Shruti mantras that all the perfect Lord threw a glance over matter and thus created all living beings. So this is Prabhupada explaining Janmadiyaseta, that how the creation takes place. We all know how the creation takes place. Who would like to explain? How Krishna is directly involved in creation. Who will explain? How he is directly Anvyad and how he is indirectly Itarastha. Who will explain? Yes, Sonika.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, directly Krishna is involved in his swan's performance, like his plenary expansion, Mahavishnu, who impregnate the universe by his vision.
Yes, by his glance. Very good.
And indirectly, he is involved through Lord Brahma.
Okay, very good. Very good example. Both the examples are perfect example. Directly as his expansions in the form of Mahavishnu, who impregnates the material nature. He converts the Mahatattva into Pradhan. The modes manifest and the creation begins. And that creation is done by whom? By Brahmaji. And that Brahmaji gets the intelligence, as we have discussed, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport. So that intelligence to Brahma is also given by the Supreme Lord. Very good. Very good. Someone else with other examples? Someone else will try? Venika gave very graphic examples, but there are other ways also to explain, directly and indirectly. बोलिए. Prabhupada gives one more example, very prominent example. We have discussed sometimes, many times. The potter and the pot. You remember that example? The potter and the pot. Who will explain? You are, giving me a response, such a cold response that no one has ever heard that. So many times we have discussed that. Where Shil Prabhu? You have heard that example, na? So many times I have given that example. So you explain. Quickly, Prabhu, we don't. I'm already late to begin. We want to finish this first verse, at least cover it by tomorrow.
Prabhuji, the material energy that all the five earth, water, fire, air, ether, that is also energy of the Supreme Lord. So in that way also, Prabhuji, he is the cause of the creation.
Very good. Yes, material energy is also actually the material energy seems to be the immediate cause. But the material energy is not acting on its own. So material energy, as Prabhupada is mentioning, is under the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is direct or indirect?
Indirect, Prabhuji, indirect.
Direct. Okay. So give me one example of direct. Someone else? You have to, apply your heart in understanding. Otherwise, the understanding of Janmadi Asyata will remain in the book. It will not enter into the heart or into our understanding in intelligence. That how is the cause of all causes. But this Vyasadeva is beginning this Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam with this verse, with this principle as the most prominent principle. I will not tell you. You have to tell me. You think we have already discussed so many times and you explain. Okay. So the Supreme Lord is creating and the human race is also creating. So what is the difference between the two? So this will come. That is, Supreme Lord is all perfect, is confirmed in all Shruti mantras. It is said in the Shruti mantras that the all perfect Lord threw a glance over matter and thus created all living beings. The living beings are parts and parcel of the Lord, and he impregnates the vast material creation with seeds of spiritual sparks. And thus the creative energies are set in motion to enact so many wonderful creations. An atheist may argue that God is no more expert than a watchmaker. But of course, God is greater because he can create machines in duplicate males and females form. So this is the difference between God's creation and human creation. That he can create machines in duplicate male and female forms. The male and female forms of different types of machines go on producing innumerable similar machines without God's further attention. So what it means? That they are complete. What is the difference between God's creation and man's creation? That the man's creation is not complete. It cannot continue of its own. Give some examples. Some examples of man's creation. Yes, Sonika.
Prabhuji, artificial intelligence added robots.
Yeah, but can one robot produce another robot?
No, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Okay. Man has created car. What is the result of creation of car? It is causing havoc. So much pollution. One devotee was explaining. The Supreme Lord has created cow. The cow will eat grass and it will give milk. Can the human intelligence do that? Is it possible? And the cow can produce, it can multiply. It is both in the male and female form. The Prabhupada says the male and the female forms of different types of machineries go on producing innumerable similar machines without God's further attention. If a man could manufacture such a machine that could produce other machines without his attention, then he could approach the intelligence of God. But that is not possible. For each machine has to be handled individually. Therefore, no one can create as well as God. Another name for God is Asamurdhava. We have discussed that in Bhagavad Gita also. The term Asamurdhava. Asama and Urdhava. Urdhava means that is higher. And Sama means which is equal. So which means that there is no one equal to or greater than him. Param Satyam of the Supreme Truth is he who has no equal or superior. This is confirmed in the Shruti mantra. It is said that before the creation of the material universe, there existed the Lord only, who is master of everyone. That Lord instructed Brahmā in Vedic knowledge. That Lord has to be obeyed in all respects. Anyone who wants to get rid of this material entanglement must surrender unto him. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Which verse? Very famous verse of Bhagavad Gita. Anyone who wants to get rid of the material entanglement must surrender unto him. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Which verse is this of the Bhagavad Gita? Very famous verse. All of you should be knowing. Boli Manini Mataji, which verse is this of Bhagavad Gita?
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम।
Hare Krishna.
याद नहीं है प्रभु जी, सॉरी।
ये नहीं चलेगा, याद नहीं। भूलते हैं हम वही है जिसके बारे में हम कन्विंस नहीं। Yes, Dayashil bro. Very famous, popular verse. So many times we have basic philosophy.
Mama māyā durataya.
Yes. Mame.
Prapadyante māyāmetam taranti.
Yes. So if one surrenders to Krishna, then he can be free from the entanglement of Maya. That is the only way to become free. Unless one surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, it is certain that he will be bewildered. Very clear. When an intelligent man surrenders unto the lotus feet of Krishna and knows completely that Krishna is the cause of all causes. What is this verse? When an intelligent man surrenders unto the lotus feet of Krishna and knows completely that Krishna is the cause of all causes, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, then only such an intelligent man becomes a Mahatma or great soul. This we have discussed. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanvan mam prapadyate vasudevam sarvam iti sa mahatva sudurlubha. But such a great soul is rarely seen. Only the Mahatmas can understand that the Supreme Lord is the primeval cause of all creations. He is Parama or ultimate truth, because all other truths are relative to him. He is omniscient. For him, there is no illusion. Some Mayavadi scholars argue that Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam was not compiled by Śrīla Vyāsadeva. This is another thought process of some deviated people. And some of them argue that this book is a modern creation written by someone named Vopadeva. In order to refute such meaningless arguments, Sri Sridhar Swami points out that there is a reference to the Bhagavatam in many of the oldest Puranas. This first śloka of the Bhagavatam begins with the Gayatri mantra. This is reference to this in the Matsya Purāṇa, which is the oldest Purāṇa. In that Purāṇa, it is said about the Bhagavatam that in it there are many narrations of the spiritual instructions. That it begins with the Gayatri mantra and it contains the history of Vritasura. That is Satyam Param Dhimahi. That is the Gayatri mantra. Anyone who makes a gift of this great work on the full moon day attains to the highest perfection of life by returning to Godhead. That is the glory of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. That is the Bhadra Purnima day, the day we celebrate Bhadra Purnima. So it is said in the Bhagavatam itself that anyone who makes gift of this work on the full moon day attains to the highest perfection of life by returning to Godhead. There is reference to the Bhagavatam in other Puranas, also where it is clearly stated that this work was finished in 12 cantos, which include 18,000 shlokas. In the Padma Purāṇa also there is reference to the Bhagavatam in a conversation between Gautam and Maharaj Amrisha. The king was advised therein to read regularly Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam if he desired liberation from material bondage. Under these circumstances, there is no doubt about the authority of the Bhagavatam. Within the past 500 years, many erudite scholars and acharyas like Jiva Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, Śrīla Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Vallabhacharya, and so many distinguished scholars, even after the time of Lord Chaitanya, made elaborate commentaries on the Bhagavatam. And the serious student would do well to attempt to go through them to better relish the transcendental messages. Śrīla Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur specifically deals with the original and the pure sex psychology, Adi Ras, devoid of all mundane inebriety. The whole material creation is moving under the principle of sex life. In modern civilization, sex life is the focal point for all activities. Wherever one turns his face, he sees sex life predominant. Therefore, sex life is not unreal. Its reality is experienced in the spiritual world. The material sex life is but a perverted reflection of the original fact. The original fact is the absolute truth, and thus the absolute truth cannot be impersonal. It is not possible to be impersonal and contain pure sex life. So what is pure sex life? It is the Adi Rasa. The rasa which is exchanged between Krishna and Srimati Radharani. And what we see in this material world is a perverted reflection. The original fact is in the absolute truth. And thus the absolute truth cannot be impersonal. It is not possible to be impersonal and contain pure sex life. Consequently, the impersonalist philosophers have given indirect impetus to the abominable mundane sex life because they have overstressed the impersonality of the ultimate truth. Consequently, man without information of the actual spiritual form of sex has accepted perverted material sex life as the all in all. There is distinction between sex life in the diseased material condition and in the spiritual sex life. This Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam will gradually elevate the unbiased reader to the highest perfectional stage of transcendence. It will enable him to transcend the three modes of material activities, fruitive actions, speculative philosophy, and worship of functional deities as incalculated in the Vedic verses. So here ends Srila Prabhupada's purport to this first verse of Janmadiyasya Yataha. So Prabhupada has given detailed explanation that how Krishna is the cause of all causes, both directly and indirectly. He is Abhigna Swarata. He is cognizant of everyone and everything, and yet he is fully independent. He is the one who has imparted all the knowledge, intelligence to Brahmaji for creation, for sub-creation. We will see in the second chapter that there are 10 subject matters of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So the first is Sarga, which is creation. And creation is done by the Supreme Lord. And the second item is called Visargaha, which is the sub-creation. And the sub-creation is carried out by Brahmaji. So Brahmaji, to be able to carry out this sub-creation or material creation, that intelligence is also provided by the Supreme Lord. So he is Sarva Karan Karanam. And because of his creation, the three modes, even the great sages are bewildered. Devashis, you are joining at the time of 9. अभी तो बंद होने का समय है. श्लोका याद हो गया?
Yes, Rojan.
ठीक है, आप 9 बजे जुड़ रहे हैं. So any question? Today, surprisingly, we have completed the purport. Yes, Sonika.
Prabhuji, my question is from yesterday's purport.
Okay.
You have explained, Prabhuji, about the that Gayatri mantra is there in the first verse. So what is Gayatri mantra and what is its importance and why it is mentioned here?
It is Satyam Param Dhimahi, as the Acharyas explained. Gayatri mantra, you know, Om Bhur Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodaya. That is what we know. But here also the Gayatri mantra is there. Acharya Srila Jiva Goswami is mentioning, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is mentioning, Srila Bhakti Samsadi Thakur is mentioning. The Gayatri mantra is called the Brahma Gayatri. Normally the Gayatri is called the Brahma Gayatri. But Brahmaji's empowerment is also coming from the Supreme Lord. He is the cause of all causes. So here, Brahmaji is also meditating before creation on the Supreme Lord. And here we see Vyasadeva is also meditating. He says, Satyam Param Dhimahi. So what the translation says, that I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. So that Satyam is the supreme truth. And Param is the absolute, the supreme absolute personality of Godhead. And Dhimahi is I meditate upon. So Vyasadeva, Brahmaji, everyone is meditating upon the Supreme Lord. And this Satyam Param Dhimahi represents the Gayatri Mantra. As we saw today also in the purport, we saw in the conclusion that the acharyas are mentioning, here we saw that the Gayatri Mantra is there. It was mentioned, we were reading. The Gayatri Mantra is Satyam Param Dhimahi. So this is the representation that Gayatri Mantra is also this verse is mentioning about the Supreme Lord. It is indicating to the Supreme Lord. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna. We read today, I read talking about the Gayatri Mantra in some section of the purport. Here it is said. It is in that Purāṇa, the Matsya Purāṇa Prabhupada is mentioning, in that Purāṇa it is said about the Bhāgavatam that there are many narrations of the spiritual instructions which begins with the Gayatri Mantra, and that it contains the history of Vritasur. So the beginning of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is with the Gayatri Mantra, and of course in the sections of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam there is history of this great demon who is Vritasur. So both is there, and it is mentioned in the glory of Bhagavat Purāṇa is mentioned in many other Puranas, including the Matsya Purāṇa. Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Any question? From tomorrow we will take the next verse, the second verse. The first three verses are compared with Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. And tomorrow's verse is the Abhideya verse. Yes, Devashish, verse sunaiye.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevāya Janmadhyasya Yato Anabhayad Itarastas Charthe Svabhigyana Swarat Ten Brahma Hridayadikavale Muhyanti Yat Suryaha Teja Bari
Tejovari Mridam.
Teja Bari Mridam Yatha Dinimayo Tri Yatra Trisangam Risa
Trisarga. Sarga is creation. Yatra Trisarga Amrisha.
Dhamna Swena Sada Nirasta Pukam Satyam Paramam Dhima.
Very good. Of course, we have to make some effort. Not an easy verse to memorize. But with a little bit of effort, you will see Krishna reciprocates. So please read this purport at least few times. It's a big purport, but read it few times to get a clearer understanding and write on each of the components. What is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya? We discussed in such detail. Why he begins with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya? To establish that the absolute truth is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and he is a person. And so many evidences were given. Then what is Janmadhyasya Yataha? How Krishna is the cause of creation, maintenance and destruction. So you should write with relevant references from the Shastras, as Srila Prabhupada is quoting in the purport and as we have discussed. Otherwise, this understanding will not come. It will not come on its own. How much effort we are making, according to that only it will be revealed. So, Bhagavatam, you cannot make a conquest. You have to make a request. And what it means to make a request is trying to sincerely study and understand the principles, the conceptions which are given. How is itarastha and anvyat both is directly and indirectly responsible? Many examples are there. How is both directly also, how is responsible for creation, and how indirectly he is participating. And how still he is abhigna and swarata. So in each of these terms of the principles, you should have clarity. Then how is imparting the Vedic knowledge in the heart of Brahma? And how everyone else, including the great sages and the demigods, muhyanti yat suryaha. How the three modes are bewildering everyone. The temporary thing is taken as permanent, as reality. Tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayam. Yatati sarga amrisha. And how the Supreme Lord is situated in his abode. Brahma ji is speaking. So we also see that how there is oneness between the Supreme Lord and the living entities. That is called the Abhed Vakya. Oneness of the Supreme Lord, the living entities, and the material universe. That is the Abhed Vakya. And then how there is difference, that is the Bhed Vakya. So all these details and all these principles, what we have to do? Satyam Param Dhimai. You should have to meditate. What it means to meditate, you have to write. And whoever does that will get a clearer and convincing understanding in his heart. And then he can relish Bhagavata. Then he can know the principles of Bhagavata. Okay. So I'm stopping here. And please, again, I am requesting, study this purport at least few times. And write, if not on the full purport, write at least on few principles. What is your understanding? Thank you very much. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.